For this lecture, we'll look at how employment or unemployment can affect government finances. Now, government finances relate to two concepts, being taxation and welfare payments. And we know very well what taxes are, and we should know what welfare payments are, which are just payments made to the unemployed so that they can lead a reasonable standard of living. And that's why everyone wants to come to Australia, because of the guaranteed welfare payments the government gives you if you are unemployed and you are guaranteed, or you are seeking to find a job. So government welfare payments are a very attractive proposition for those who are unemployed. And also taxation, though, may be a very unattractive proposition for those who are employed. So at the moment we have what is called a progressive income tax. And this is basically saying that as your income rises, there will be a greater proportion of your income paid in tax. And the government needs tax to fund for public goods and services, what we talked about in the microeconomics part of this course. And welfare payments are just fixed payments paid to those unemployed. So we're going to look at this from two different ways, as we did with unemployment and income distribution. We're going to look at how unemployment or high unemployment would affect taxation and welfare payments, and therefore the government finances. And then we'll look at the opposite of how low unemployment or full unemployment can affect government finances. Okay, so let's look at the situation where there is high unemployment. So let's look at high. When there's high unemployment, such as the one that occurred during the GFC of 2008-2009, we experienced an increase in the number of unemployed from around 240,000 people, which is a lot of people, to a crazy 680,000 people. And that was even worse in the United States, when even more jobs got laid off. So Australia didn't pick the short straw, they actually picked the long straw, and they weren't too bad. But as you can see, the unemployment rate nearly doubled, or more than doubled. So more than double. So over 2 times it increased by. So what happens to taxation is that because there is a lower income or the lower national income, because more are unemployed, therefore taxes would decrease. So because people are earning less income, and because, say high income earners move down brackets instead of creeping up brackets, and therefore less income tax will be paid to the government. And as you can see, the government finances or government income or revenue as a result. So government revenue in the form of taxation would decrease. Now let's look at how this would affect welfare payments. With more people unemployed, therefore the government requires to pay more welfare. And this means that government expenditure will increase. So how do they increase this expenditure? How do they increase expenditure when they have less revenue? And this comes back to the idea of borrowing money from either the international or overseas, from the private sector, or the RBA. And each of these we'll talk about in a further lecture on how the government can fund budget deficits. And so as you can see, in the past year, the Australian budget deficit had increased, or what it was before, a guaranteed surplus by the Labor government had turned into a large deficit. So we can see that because unemployment is high, therefore taxation would decrease and government revenue would decrease, but welfare payments would increase as a result. And therefore this requires the government to borrow more money from overseas, the private sector, or the RBA, which means the RBA has to print out more money. And that would increase or decrease our exchange rate or increase the inflation rate in the economy. And so the government has to weigh up the pros and cons of each and see how they should finance this government deficit. And this will be expanded more thoroughly in the lecture on the budget, how to fund a budget deficit. Okay, so we talked about taxation. We talked about how unemployment can cause a decrease in taxation and an increase in welfare payments. And so the government finances would decrease as a result of unemployment. Contrastly, if we were to look at low inflation, so low unemployment, I should say, this would affect taxation and welfare payments differently, or in the opposite vein. So, low unemployment. When there is low unemployment, therefore more people can be taxed, because more people have jobs. And those on higher incomes will move into even higher income brackets because of great or good economic conditions. So they will move into higher brackets. So what this means is that tax revenue for the government will increase. And this is a very favourable situation for the government, because then they could use the budget surplus to pay for existing financial commitments or existing debt. What it also means is that the welfare payments of the country would also decrease, because there are now fewer unemployed. So where there was high unemployment, say around 10%, now as it approaches the 5% natural rate of unemployment, the government cuts down 5% of those who need welfare payments. So they nearly halve their welfare payments paid out to the community. And therefore this will mean less welfare expenditure. And this would mean a decrease in government expenditure. And so this proves a favourable situation on government finances. And so because taxation increases, they're getting more revenue, and because welfare decreases, because more are employed and therefore do not require welfare payments, the government finances would improve. So improve in situations of full employment. So now we've seen how unemployment or high unemployment can affect government finances, and how low unemployment can affect government finances through taxation and welfare payments.